Hello there and welcome to tonight's broadcast of the Evening Review. My name is Ogito Craig, and in studio with me this evening I have Mr. Robert Ngololo. He's a records and archivist practitioner. Good evening, Robert.
Good evening, Mr. Craig. Thank you for having me.
Yes, Mr. Ngololo will soon be hosting a workshop on legal and regulatory framework for electronic records keeping in Namibia. But let's start at the beginning, Robert. What is the current state of electronics record keeping in Namibia?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Craig. So perhaps maybe I would like to start from the beginning, sort of like give a brief background on records management in general, and then I'll come to your question. So,
okay.
Records and archives management in general is premised on three pillars. That is accountability, transparency, and good governance.
Yes.
So records management in practice tries to achieve all these pillars. So that is one. Number two, I'll then now talk about the historical developments of records and archives, or also the Archives Act in Namibia. So Namibia became a colony, or was colonized by the German colonial government since 1884.
Yeah.
They colonized Namibia, and then the South African government took over. So when Namibia was being colonized by the German government, obviously the German government had an administration here. As part of their administration, they had their archives. So the German archives are also one of the most important part of Namibian history, because the German archives are what during the German colonial era, most of the farms or most of the land, the maps and everything like that is hosted or is documented in those archives. Hence, it is very important to preserve them. And it's very important to preserve them and also to keep them, not only for history, but also to know, even today, where land borders and the land markings are, so we get to know and understand. So
yes.
That is one. Number two, the South African government, the apartheid government took over. When the apartheid government took over, they also had their own archives. They took over the German archives, and from the German archives, they also created or developed onto that, created their own archives. And until 1990, when Namibia got independence, the new Namibian government also took over the archives. And when the archives kept changing from regime from government to government, so did the law change.
Okay.
The Germans had their own law on archives. The South Africans, or the apartheid government, had their own law on archives. So did Independence Namibia also have their own law on archives. So now, the law on archives during the apartheid period was a bit controversial, because there were apartheid policies in place, and the black people were not allowed to access these things, and so forth and so forth. But when Namibia got independence, the Archives Act, what changed about the Archives Act, the only provisions of the then Archives Act and the Archives Act after independence is that the elements or the remnants that talk about apartheid and not allowing black people access and all those, and not documenting perhaps black people's history and those things, were removed.
Okay.
So now we had to adapt. After independence, Namibia adopted the Archives Act 12 of 1992.
Okay.
Yeah, that was now when we got independence in 1990. After a year or two, in 1992, the Archives Act 12 of 1992 was promulgated. So now, when the Archive Act was passed, the legislature then, according to the Act, if you read the Act now, you'll see that they only had paper records in mind.
Yeah.
There was no. They did not think of electronic records. Perhaps that's why the Archives Act today, since 1992, it was not amended. It was not reviewed. There was a draft records management policy that the National Archives was trying to develop. That did not come to pass. It did not. It was never passed. It's still in its draft form today. The draft records management policy, it's been a draft since, I think, 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah. So from 1990 up to date, the Archives Act still has very much paper records in mind. It was not reviewed or amended to accommodate electronic records. But some argue that by extension, that it covers electronic records as well. But it is not explicitly defined in the Act to say we cover electronic records as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
While you're on the subject of the foundation, could you also touch on how it ties into the Constitution before we get to the state of affairs at the moment?
Yeah, now, how records and archives ties into the Constitution. The Constitution in the Bill of Rights has two provisions that speak to records and archives. That is your Article 18 and Article 21. Now, in terms of Article 18, in terms of Article 18 of the Namibian Constitution, Article 18 states that administrative officers or anyone that is practicing or that is practicing an administrative function, these are people that are in government or in institutions that are created by statute, must do so justly and fairly. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So now, how records management ties to this is in the administration of justice, or when you are ensuring that your decision, the decisions that you take must be just and fair.
Yeah.
Now, when you take decisions, you are usually you might affect, or somebody might be affected by your decision.
Yes.
So also leading up to your decision, what will help you to come to sound and a correct decision? It is mostly records. That's why records management is important in this regard. You can only make the right decision if you are provided the right record at the right time. And the right record with integrity, the right record that cannot be altered, and that has authority. Yeah, so that is how it ties in with Article 18 of the Constitution. And in terms of Article 21, it talks about the freedom of expression and also access to information, and also the protection of the right to privacy. Now, those are very important provisions. So how do you guarantee this? How do you guarantee access to information and also ensure protection of privacy? Do you understand?
Yeah.
So those two provisions, when somebody comes, in Namibia, we recently promulgated the Access to Information Act, but I don't think it is enforced yet.
No, it is not enforced.
It is not enforced yet. So when the Access to Information Act comes into force, it then becomes mandatory for everyone or for every Namibian citizen to approach any government institution to request for information using the Act.
Yes.
But now, when you are requesting for this information, does the state or does the parastatal or the government institution where the information is being requested from have the right people to know which is the right record? You know, a record is usually a document that is signed and complete. It is just not a draft document.
Yeah.
How will you ensure that this person that is tasked to provide access to information does not provide a draft?
Yeah.
These are things that look very simple but are very important.
Yeah.
Because if I provide you with a draft, of what value is a draft?
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So I must be able to have an understanding to say, I know what the record is, or the person that is employed or that is providing access to information provides the right record to the right person in the right possible time. Right possible time, because it does not help I wait for 6 months for a record I requested from a government office.
Yeah.
I mean, I come to your office because perhaps maybe I want a task done in the next day,
Yeah.
in the next 2 days, not in the next week or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So that is one. And the other one is access to the protection of privacy. How then do you ensure you provide access to information while also protecting the privacy of individuals?
Yes.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So now I come to a public institution, I request for information, but that request contains private information of an individual.
Yeah.
And that person, I'm not the owner of that information. Sort of is another person requesting for that information. What do you do in cases like that?
Yeah.
So records management, records and archives management is very important, and the understanding thereof is also very, very, very important and crucial for public sector institutions. And I also think it's a very question that you asked me. And also one thing I'd like to highlight in terms of why there's an important need to pass the Access to Information Act. As much as we have Article 21 of the Constitution, it is very difficult and expensive to enforce constitutional provisions.
Yes.
It is very, very difficult. You understand? Yeah.
Now let's come back to the original question. Could you describe the state of electronic record keeping in Namibia at the moment? I ask this question in the context of experiences that even I have had walking into a room with boxes and boxes full with files, papers and documents, and no order to try and extract information from such haphazard storage is impossible task.
Yeah.
So I want to know, in general, you as a practitioner of records and archives, what is your impression of the state of that industry in Namibia?
The state of electronic records management in Namibia, I would start to discuss it from perhaps a national level down to an institutional level.
Okay.
On a national level, as we speak currently, there is no straightforward electronics records management law or policy. There's usually, my colleagues in government usually like to refer to the draft records management policy. But I'm not sure now, because a draft document is of no force or effect. It stays a draft. So they like making reference to that document. It has been a draft since 2017. It is still in a draft state. So on a national level, we know the Office of the Prime Minister had rolled out the EDRMS. They have what they call Electronic Document and Records Management System project. They had rolled it out to various ministries. There were some ministries that were used as pilots, and now I think they are at the level where they are rolling it out into the entire into the entire ministries. And that is now on a national level, the status of electronic records. So what they do on that system is they scan documents, they upload documents, sort of trying to capture electronic records and to go digital. But because it has been a while since I worked in government, the status of that project, I don't know. I cannot really say much on it. But on institutional level, I can speak for parastatals because I work for one. Parastatals are working, let me say the system, to correctly put it, is the state of records and electronic records in Namibia is fragmented. Okay. Every parastatal is doing its own thing. So you are left at the mercy of, if you have a good records and archives manager, then you are good, because perhaps they will look at ISO standards in defining your EDRMS or your electronic records. They will look at ISO requirements, functional specifications, what the electronic record system must have for it to have integrity, for it to be reliable, for it to be used in a court of law, for example. Yes. All those features. So they look at those things, and then they develop system, or they procure systems that meet all those criteria, because they first benchmark and then put out functional specifications that answer to what they want in their parastatal institution. Also maybe for the benefit of parastatals. Parastatals have resources, unlike perhaps maybe government ministries that have to cater for many sub-directorates. Parastatals have maybe the resources and the budget to procure these electronic records management systems. But the state of electronic records management in parastatals is fairly good, and in government, I would say I've heard of it, it is there, I've seen it, but I cannot say much of it because I've not interacted with it. So I would say the state of records management is fragmented, because nationally you'd want a position where the National Archives takes charge of electronic records. It implements a national policy on electronic records. It lays down functional specifications for government institutions to use, to say, these are functional specifications for electronic records, for any institutions that wants to implement electronic records. Come benchmark here. These are functional specifications. These are according to ISO standards and best standards, and I mean best practice standards. Please develop from here.
Robert, let's take a break now, because we have to quickly go pay the bills, but we'll be right back after this. Thank you very much.
Missed the latest episode of Tourismus? Don't worry, Echo has you covered. Catch every travel adventure, insider industry news, and exciting destinations from Tourismus anytime, anywhere. Visit www.oneup2.com and click on Echo to relive the journeys, rewind the adventures, replay the stories. Tourismus, where adventure meets prime time.
Welcome back to the Evening Review. My name is Ogito Craig, and in studio with me this evening I have Mr. Robert Ngololo. He is an archives and record-keeping practitioner. And Robert, you were just telling us about international standards when it comes to records and archives, especially electronic record-keeping.
Yeah.
Please elaborate a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Greg. So I'll start off with the core ISO standard for records and archives management. This one is the core standard that defines the concepts that should be used in electronic records management. Not only in electronic records management, but also generally in records management. So that first standard is the ISO 15489. I've written them down because they're quite a few.
Yeah.
I could not be able to remember them from the top of my head. Yeah. So there's ISO standard 15489. This one talks about the core standards and concepts of records management.
Okay.
This one is sort of like the bedrock of any records management program that you would want to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is one. And then we have ISO standard 16175. Part 1 of 2022. This one outlines the functional requirements of a software for electronic records management.
Okay.
Now, the reason why these standards are very important is they are very important for not only for at the national level, whoever wants to perhaps maybe take it upon themselves one day to roll out or to lay out these specifications, but also just for public institutions to know and to lay their foundation strongly as per international standards.
Yes.
Because we don't have national standards, unfortunately. That's the reality. So we have 16175, part 1 of 2022. This one lays the functional requirements of an EDRMS or electronic records management software that you want to have. What do you want it to have? You want it to capture normal records as you are working. You want it to capture emails, and you want it to capture hard copy records, perhaps maybe as they are coming into the institution, they are being scanned and uploaded.
Yeah.
And also the metadata thereof, and also the content type, things like correspondences and the like, all those things. So that is one. And then there's one on digital preservation. Now, in records management terms, preservation is keeping records for posterity.
Okay.
That is why we have institutions like the National Archives. The National Archives preserves documentary heritage, used to preserve documentary heritage, but also now, because now we're in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution, it is required to preserve digital records as well. So now this ISO standard talks about digital preservation. It is ISO 14721 of 2012. It talks about digital preservation, how to ensure that digital records are treated the same as paper records. You know, paper records with the National Archives, it is secure.
Yeah.
The conditions, the environmental conditions, the housekeeping in there is secure. The records are accessible and they are readable for many years.
Yes.
We have records since the German colonial period that are in the National Archives of Namibia that you can still access until today. So because we want the same for digital records, hence the ISO standard that we must follow. So that one is for preservation, and then we have ISO 19009 of 2005 for PDFA format. This one is also for preservation, for preserving records. And then, in my opinion, I think we have the most important one, which talks about cyber security and information security, which help institutions create robust cybersecurity systems. This one is ISO/IEC 27001 of 2022, part 1, and ISO 27701 of 2019. Yeah.
So is it possible to get that kind of certification, even though we don't have national standards? Can we get certified for the international standards?
To get certified for the national standards, definitely, because there are auditors. I don't know of Namibia, but in South Africa, there are auditors that there are institutions that are able to audit your systems and provide you with ISO certifications to say you comply with ISO standards fully.
Okay. On another tack, Robert, I'd just like you to expand a little bit for us about the role of archives and record keeping in terms of good governance, in terms of transparency and anti-corruption.
Yeah. Now, when I started earlier in my introduction, I mentioned that few of the pillars that records and archives management is premised on is good governance. Good governance, transparency and accountability.
Yeah.
So good governance, how? Good governance, records management, when you have good records management practices in place,
Yeah.
corruption is reduced. How is corruption reduced? For example, I'll give you a practical example now of workings in registries and how, or workings in institutions. For example, a document comes in the institution, or a record comes in. Now, when a record comes into the institution, number one, it is very important to understand by law that any transaction or any documentation that is produced of a transaction within a state or a public entity, it is never your personal record.
Okay.
It is never the personal record of an individual that produces it. So when you produce records during the function of your work or during your course of work, it is not your personal record. It is, these records belong to the state. That is one. And number one, these government institutions are mandated to have registries in terms of the Archives Act and the registry manuals that are created thereof.
Yeah.
Every public institution must have a registry that acts as a repository for current and semi-current records. So those records that you are using, when a record comes, it is registered into a register book and it is recorded, it is recorded into a register, incoming register, and it is filed, and then to whom the document is addressed to is then informed.
Yeah.
You understand? So that person comes and they work on the document, they do whatever they do, they bring it back to the registry.
Yeah.
So this documentation is supposed to be at the central point, and anyone in the institution at the level, if they are allowed to access it, because I mean, if I'm not an executive member, I'm not allowed to access board minutes, for example.
Yes, yes.
But if you are able, or if you're an executive member, you can access board minutes, you can request for them because you are privy to these meetings. But bottom line of the story is records management ensures that records are available at the central point.
Yes, yes.
They are available in a very short space of time, and they are organized because you are a records officer. Records must be organized so that you are able to provide them in a very, very, very quick time.
Yeah.
Whether you digitize and scan, whether you scan and email the copy or you deliver hard copy,
Yeah.
it is very important that you provide it at the right time. How do these practices not encourage corruption? Because documents are accessible.
Yes,
You
yes, I see.
Corruption thrives where there is secrecy, where
Yes.
documents are locked up in cabinet, or where somebody tells you, those are my record.
Yeah.
Those are my record. No, the person is on leave. Records are locked up. It's a whole week. No work is going on.
Yes,
Do
yes.
you understand?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, things like that.
But Mr. Ngololo, what about when the records don't exist? Let's first start with the legal framework in such a situation. For instance, we've heard of many state-owned enterprises that have no record of their assets.
Yeah, definitely.
Is anybody liable?
Yeah, now that is a very, 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 very important question, Mr. Craig. In instances like that, the Archives Act in the state it is now, it is good because it encourages, it is the custodian of public records. It encourages or it mandates institutions, public institutions, to have an approved file plan, for example.
Yeah.
They must file according to the file plan, for example. They must dispose according to the file plan, for example. But as it is now, the Archives Act in its current state, it cannot enforce. It cannot hold an institution accountable that is not complying or that does not have a file plan. So many public institutions do not have an approved file plan. They are operating business as usual. There's nothing happening to them. Nobody, I almost said nobody cares. Same applies to information governance.
Yeah.
Did you know that you are not supposed to dispose of state financial records without treasury approval?
I did not know that.
You did not know that. But every public institution, should you wish to dispose of financial records, receipt books, what have you, if you want to dispose. Most public institutions only know this for auction, when they are auctioning stuff. They go to treasury and then they get approval and then they come, they conduct their auctions. But also, state financial records in terms of treasury and also the archives, treasury, in terms of treasury, the treasury rules. You are not supposed to dispose of state financial records without approval, number one, from the National Archives, In fact, the National Archive refers your request to distract financial records to Treasury. Treasury then approves your request to distract financial records.
I see.
Do you
I
understand?
see. What about if we broaden the scope and look at any organization, any institution? How important is it to have experienced, a qualified or skilled records keeper for the continued existence of any organization?
Okay. Now, it's a very good question again, Mr. Craig. Thank you very much. The importance of a records and archives officer, it is very important in the sense that a records and archives officer or records and archives manager preserves institutional memory. That is number one, and that is very important.
Yes.
And number two, as much as they preserve institutional memory, they make sure this information, as it is preserved in its state, it is accessible over time. So as the years go by, these people can make a determination to say, these records in their paper form must be digitized.
Yes.
These records in their electronic form must be made hard copies, and they must be filed accordingly in a room with a certain temperature, above how many levels from the floor, and the floor in that room must be painted, for example, and all those things. For example, the light that must be used in a place where paper records are stored, and all those things.
Yeah.
That is two. And number three, the accessibility of administrative records. You join an institution, you are looking for board minutes from 1997.
Yeah.
Who would provide you those minutes?
Yeah.
You join an institution in 2005. You're looking for board minutes in 1997 or 1998.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Who will provide you with those records in a readable state, in an accessible state? And who will provide you a record like that is authentic, indicating to say these are signed board minutes of 1997?
Yes.
Who will be able to understand that only a signed document is a record?
Yeah, yeah.
You see, only a records manager.
I like to bring things back to my own reality. And as a media practitioner, we generate a ton of information.
Yeah.
And, quite recently I've had to do with some musicians who wanted photographs taken from previous concerts, articles about them from the beginning of their career.
Definitely.
And it was difficult to get that. I've even heard of artists who have approached NBC to get previous recordings of their music that cannot be found anymore. It's just gone. So my question is, how quickly after the succession of qualified records keepers and archivists is interrupted by appointing your cousin or somebody who quickly needs a job, how quickly would that impact on the entire archive? And how difficult is it to recreate that archive after such
an incident? Okay. I'll start with your first question. How quickly to put up an archive like that when you have a skilled or a qualified records practitioner in your institution? I would say fairly quickly, because once you join an institution or you are starting to set up an archive or a record center, you are able to know and understand which records to focus on.
Yeah.
For example, when you newly join an institution, in that whatever financial year you join, there will be audits going on.
Robert, I need to interrupt you because we're almost out of time, and I want you to leave us with the details of the workshop that you are organizing and where and how people can participate.
Okay, so the workshop I'm organizing is titled The Legal and Regulatory Framework for Electronic Records in Namibia, and it is taking place at NIPA, Namibia Public Administration Institution, NIPAM. It is taking place in NIPAM in Olympia, and it is taking place from the 25th to the 28th of November. To register, you can contact me. You can contact me on 0853 100 294. That is my cell phone number. Please do so. Yeah, and the speakers for the workshop will be professionals from South Africa. We have Mr. Paul Malan. He's information governance strategy. Sorry, Dr. Paul Malan. He's an information governance strategy. And then we have Johan Peters. He's an expert on heritage and documentation. And then we have Mr. Vene Hellebrich. He's the former head of archives of Namibia. And then we have Karel Gaib, he's an admitted legal practitioner of the High Court of Namibia. And then we have Miss Victoria Shikale, she's a lecturer at one of the local universities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ngololo.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for joining us to hear this discussion on this very interesting topic. Please, if you can, I think it's worthwhile to join that workshop. But for now, we say good night.